And welcome to Geopolitics and Money, formerly known as Geopolitics in Conflict. Excited to be with you once again. But we are even more excited today because we have an interesting and great guest, and I consider him a friend. You all know me by now, guys. It's not a term I use very loosely. So it's none other than Mr. Jayant Bhandari. You have heard about him on my other channel. So we're going to do a brief intro and we're going to bring him into the studio and get on to the conversation.
Okay, so who is Jayant Bhandari? Jayant is constantly traveling the world to look for investment opportunities, particularly in the natural resource sector, which is very interesting. We talk about natural resources all the time and the role that they play in geopolitics. So I'm very excited to dive into that. He worked for 6 years with U.S. global investors. And were you in San Antonio physically?
No, I was living mostly in Vancouver, but I was visiting San Antonio quite often.
Because we're in Texas here, so we definitely spend time in San Antonio. Let's see. Before immigrating from India, he started and ran Indian subsidiary operations of 2 European companies. Oh my goodness, you guys, it's late here. He's written on political, economic, and cultural issues for Liberty Magazine, the Mises Institute, which I'm a very big fan of, in the US and Canada and India. Casey Research, Acting Man, International Man, Mining Journal, Zero Hedge, which I'm also a big fan of, Lou Rockwell, Fraser Institute, Le Québécois Libre, Malden Economics, Northern Miner, Mining Markets, and he is a contributing editor of Liberty Magazine. Welcome to the show.
Oh, great.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah. And you guys, by the way, if you want to read the full bio of Jayant, just go to the description below the video. There, we put everything there about the background of Jayant. So let's get into it because we got a lot to cover, and we don't want to waste time here. So, Jayant, I'd like to start. You are in finance, you are in investments, you know a great deal about the economy and so forth. How do you, in your opinion, how do you assess the state of the global economy given the turmoil that's going on?
Well, it is a turmoil. Everything is changing very rapidly. There is a huge amount of volatility in the market. There's a huge amount of fear in the market. And I'm reasonably sure a lot of companies are worried about what all these tariffs mean for their businesses. They will have problems procuring their ingredients, they will have problems selling their products, and they have to maybe reorient themselves for all those things. And you can see, at least in the last 1 week, the US market has fallen. And I'm currently in Asia, so I did not watch what was happening last night, my time in the US market, but it has been very volatile, and I think it will continue to be volatile because Trump really means business. Whether you like his policies or not, he really means business, and other people will take measures to counter him. So this will have a snowballing effect eventually in the markets. We'll see how it plays out, but turmoil is the right word to use.
Well, it's interesting you're talking about, companies looking at, how are they going to do business, especially Chinese companies in the US companies in China, and then obviously Canada and Mexico also. One of the things that we did a little bit of a dive into was Walmart asking suppliers, actually asking the manufacturers to eat the tariffs. But my understanding is the way that Walmart does business does not exactly lend itself towards a lot of profit margin for suppliers. So it's very interesting to see where those tariffs will actually shake out in terms of who's going to end up paying them.
Yes, Elizabeth, that's very true. Chinese companies operate at a very thin margin. They operate on volume and thin margins. So I don't know how it will play out. And in fact, from what I hear, government in China already asked Walmart people to come over, and they were reprimanded for asking the suppliers to reduce their prices. So I don't know how this will play out. But again, yes, Chinese companies operate at a very thin margin, and it will eventually, tariffs will reflect in the prices that you and I will pay in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But just to piggyback on this point regarding China and tariffs, how do you see Donald Trump's policies regarding the economy writ large? We're not talking just about Canada or Mexico. How do you see these policies that he is embarking on that is going to end up causing more harm, at least domestically, for the average citizen, in your opinion?
I think I'm not so sure about it. I think any reorientation of the economy and political structure will create a turmoil in the market. So in the short term, there will be pain for everyone, not just for Americans or Chinese or Europeans. It will be pain for everyone. But as long as his policies bring an orientation of the market in the way that it's fair, then I'm all for it. Short-term pains have to be faced if you want to reduce the size of bureaucracy, if you want to cut down on wasteful expenses in the government, and if you want to reduce regulations. Now, David, I'm currently in China, and the last time I talked with you, I was in China as well. So I'm coming to China quite a bit these days. As you can see, the Chinese large company ETF has gone up by about 50% in the last 1 year. And Hang Seng Index has gone up about 40% as well. So let's not forget that while we have all these turmoil in the European and American and Canadian markets, there's a lot of pessimism in China as well. But the market at least is showing that there is an improvement, at least in China. And my guess is that all these things will end up being an improvement for the US as well. There will be short-term pains for all of us. I mean, my options have fallen in value. My portfolio is down significantly. But in the short term, I'm feeling the pain. But at the same time, I hope Trump is doing the right thing. I don't know whether he's doing the right thing or not, because things are happening so rapidly that I find it difficult to keep pace with what he's doing.
Wow. Well, honestly, you and the rest of us, he is moving at rapid fire pace. Yeah. And it's very interesting. We talked a lot about that today, actually, on the live stream. If you guys were watching it, our viewers, but we talked a lot about that really the U.S. economy, when Donald Trump was handed the economy, it was a mess. And the amount of money that had been funneled into the U.S. economy by the government was unsustainable. But it was Biden kind of kicking the can down the road, right? He was kicking the debt can down the road. He was kicking the economic crisis that has been brewing for a long time. He had been kicking it down with basically government stimulus without calling it that, right? So in just a massive infusion of trillions of dollars into the economy over the 4 years that he was president. So Trump was handed a mess. So he had two choices, right? The choice was do something. Now, I'm interested in your opinion on whether this was the right thing to do or not, but do something, or like his predecessors, continue to kick the can down the road. Do you see that as what he's doing? And what do you think of the policies that he's implemented so far? And I also am interested in your opinion of him taking government spending out of GDP, because I know that that's something that they're planning to do as well.
Well, so Elizabeth, I 100% agree with the implications, the underpinning message that you had in what you just said. I think we don't agree with each other 100% on anything. So if we really sit down, we will disagree on a lot of things. And I disagree with Trump on a few things. But overall, every day I see what he's doing, and I say, yes, this is what needed to be done. And in fact, he's going beyond what I thought was possible. So I'm really impressed with the speed that he's doing. But again, because it's happening so quickly, I don't really understand fully the implications of his policies. because the problem with the tariff war is that you increase it by 50%, they increase by 75%, then you increase it by 100%. I don't know where it will all settle. But overall, I'm extremely happy. And I'm also very happy that America, if he stays on track, will start getting the respect it deserves back again. People around the world had started to make fun of America under Biden. And I think America deserves its respect because it maintains stability around the world. It's usually the peace broker between two countries, despite the fact that America is not a perfect country. No country is a perfect country. But America deserves its respect, and America deserves respect in the economic and trade situation as well. So if Canada and India or other countries impose unfair tariffs on America, whereas America does not do the same thing, I think Trump is 100% correct in imposing tariffs on other countries. And I'm saying that despite the fact that I'm a Canadian national.
It is interesting what you said about other countries putting tariffs on the United States, because that's not actually something that's talked about here. So when the tariff is sort of in the general narrative, it's okay, well, so Trump is putting these tariffs on these countries for these reasons, without a real understanding that they're also doing that in certain sectors also. So there's the general trade tariff that, Europe has very low trade tariffs. So do we, but it depends on what it is, right? So if it is an EV coming from China, it's 100%. But if it's, whatever else, it's, I think it's like you may know the exact number, but I think it's like 1.25 or something like that. So I'm interested in your opinion on tariffs in general, because it seems to have been a very interesting strategy for him to come out the gate with. He has been talking about it for a long time, so it's not new. But what do you think the incentive really is? Because I do not believe that the fentanyl reason is the real reason that tariffs have happened. I believe those two are separate things. Now, do I believe fentanyl should be off the streets? Absolutely. Please get it off the street. But what do you think the real economic reason is that Trump implemented these tariffs?
So I'm in the southern part of China these days, and I was driving around with a bunch of Chinese a couple of weeks back during my last trip, and the police has stopped us, and I asked him why the police had stopped me, and my friend who was driving told me that because the police saw a foreigner sitting next to him, he stopped me. And then he went on explaining to me that this is the area where the government is afraid of possibly being used for drugs purposes. And I was very shocked about it, because I thought in China you get capital punishment for trafficking in drugs. China is very strict about drugs. If I went out today and wanted to look out for drugs, as I could do in San Francisco and get those right away, here I would probably end up in prison very quickly and in serious trouble. So China is very strictly against drugs. So I am actually perplexed as well about this fentanyl issue being blamed on China. Now, I don't know all the integrities of what happens in the back room of politics, political offices. Maybe China is playing a dirty game. I don't know. But I was told by people that even if Chinese government didn't want it, Chinese ports are used for drugs trafficking because they are so efficient and so good. And because the Golden Triangle is just south of southern China, they find it logistically easier to transport through China, even if Chinese government didn't want it that way. So again, Elizabeth, I have no clue. I don't think Chinese government would necessarily want to send fentanyl to the US. But again, I know politicians are crooks, and what happens in the back room, I don't know. And maybe the US is twisting arms of China by claiming it to be fentanyl. And as you rightly implied, maybe Trump has something else which he can't talk about publicly.
Yeah.
So again, I don't fully understand. I'm not an insider to any of these things. But at the same time, China is not going to get affected by American tariffs. Neither is China going to get affected by American tariffs. So, both of these countries have really dehinged themselves from each other over the last 1 decade. Their trade relationships have reduced significantly. China has imposed tariffs on American agricultural and other commodity products. But you can't really control flow of agricultural products. They go to some other countries and flow back to yourself with a reduced tariff. So I don't think this tariff war also is a real tariff war. There's something else, as you rightly implied, and I'm very confused about it as well.
Yeah. Well, will it be fair, just to follow up on this, Jayant, will it be fair to say that the Chinese are now worried about it, given that the projections they expect for their GDP this coming year, about 5.6%?
Well, Chinese are always worried. Chinese are Chinese, as all future-oriented people are neurotic and paranoid. All successful people are neurotic and paranoid. That comes with success and future orientation. So when I talk with young Chinese, they're always worried, irrespective of what's happening in the economy. So yes, China is worried. So is America. So are you and other people worried, because smart people worry about the future, and that's what makes us relatively successful. And the fact that we survive is because we are paranoid and neurotic. And unfortunately, that comes with a certain positive orientation towards civilization.
That is true.
That's a really wonderfully human.
A good way, yeah.
That's a wonderfully human answer, because I think humanity. So my background, my degree is in global business, but my specialty is actually in human behavior. And so it's very interesting to me to watch. The reality is that people are people here, and there's the 1% of people who understand what's going on, right? Those are the people in the back rooms, and then the rest of us are like, okay, what's happening here? And the uncertainty, and I think you said it earlier, the uncertainty and fear is very high right now, because the rest of the world can't predict what the US is going to do.
Indeed. So
that's right. Yeah.
Let's shift to another theme that is very important for our viewers to understand, but especially for the American audience. And this one has to do with the concept of, not the concept rather, but the decision of President Trump regarding de-dollarization. How do you see this moving forward, given that some other countries around the world are moving into that direction of reducing their dependency on the US dollar?
Sorry, I didn't really fully understand your question, David. Did you mean that Trump wants to remove dollar as the international currency?
No. Trump threatening other countries with sanctions if they de-dollarize, if they get rid of the US.
He's trying to get
So this is interesting. This is one of those things which I thought was strange about Trump asking other people to stay on US dollar. I don't see what gives him the right to force other countries to continue to use the US dollar. And this is again one of those rare things that I disagree with him on. US dollar index has fallen this year by I think 4 or 5%, but it has just normalized. It has just fallen to the place where it was before Trump was elected. So I'm not even sure that the world is de-dollarizing either. The world depends on the US dollar. They still continue to hedge their currency based on the US dollar. Now, there are all kinds of factors why people are afraid of the US dollar. They don't want to be blocked out of the SWIFT. The SWIFT transactions as Russia got frozen out. So maybe there's a certain amount of fear to do with that, but the US is here to stay. Dollar will continue to be the currency of use internationally. And I still did not find it appropriate that Trump would force it on people that they should be using the US dollar when he said that he would impose 100% duty if BRICS countries brought in their own collective currency. And I just thought he had no authority over it, but maybe I'm missing something there.
Yeah.
It's been interesting watching him because he has come out the gate like firing hard. Like he is not taking, he is really going for it. And it's before he took office, there was a lot of conversation about de-dollarization, right? So the BRICS countries were coming out with BRICS currency, which is, with Enbridge and all of that. And it's probably going to be, they're probably not going to have like a dollar bill, right? That's like a BRICS. It's probably just going to be more trade between each other in their own currencies. But there was a lot of talk about that. And I think that in a sense, it's possible that he's trying to ease Americans' fear about that, because here there's a whole lot of conversation about, okay, the world is de-dollarizing, the dollar's not going to be the reserve currency anymore, it's not going to be worth anything, and it doesn't quite happen that way, right? It's not like the dollar is like gone overnight. That's a process that takes time. But I'm interested in your take overall on Donald Trump and BRICS, because there were a lot of tension between BRICS and the previous administration. And there's a lot of fear here in the United States about BRICS, which I think perhaps is unfounded. But China is the next largest economy, and it's a large economy that is on its upswing. So I'm curious, Donald Trump and BRICS, what do you think?
Well, so I have been talking with David for the last few years on BRICS, and I have consistently said that BRICS is a non-entity. It does not really has any influence. There's only one thing in BRICS, or maybe two things in BRICS, and those are China and Russia. All other countries under BRICS are non-entities. They are nobody countries. No one cares about them. They have no values. They have no real policies. They go along with wherever the water is flowing. So the only countries that matter in BRICS really is China at the moment, I think.
For sure, I agree.
This is the Chinese character. Chinese don't like to be visible on the podium. They want to be backseaters. They want to hide. They don't want public space. And then they do all their economic growth and they want to live in harmony. They don't want to be up front. They don't want to be facing the public. And my guess is that China does not want to be seen as the only competitor to the US, and they wanted to bring in all these nobody countries, the non-entities, as its colleagues to stand up to the US. But at the same time, Elizabeth, the thing is that China wants US dollar supremacy. Try moving your money into China. It is not easy. Chinese bank give you a lot of hassles. Now, even if I have a Chinese account and if I have a Chinese bank account outside, if I want to wire money into my account in China, hey, it's not easy. So China, even China wants, from what I see, US dollar supremacy to continue. And China is getting swap agreements with whichever country it wants. It has swap agreements with Russia, with Saudi Arabia, and it actually pegs its currency to the US dollar within a small band, as Hong Kong dollar does. So I don't see China wanting to get out of the US dollar either, because its own currency is not convertible.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting, because if you look at, the dollar used to be, I think, 80% of holdings, and now it's something more like 40%. But the yuan is like 3%. I mean, it is very, very low. And I don't see, and please give me your opinion on this, I don't see China aiming to change that. I don't see China aiming to
make their currency like
not even close.
Yeah.
Well, Chinese are very practical people, and sometimes when I hear geopolitical talk, I am more favorably inclined towards China. Now, the reason I keep coming back to China is because I see a huge amount of growth and stability in this country. I think we should really think about the agitation we impose on China by talking too much about Taiwan and Hong Kong and things like those, because the problem with asking China to become democratic or to recognize Taiwan as a separate country is that it risks destabilizing China internally, and China does not want that. So if you were on the seat of Xi Jinping, would, even if you were all in favor of Taiwan going independent, would you want that to happen? Would you accept that? Because if you did, then so many parts of China would then start asking for independence as well. So, and it would destabilize the country. And I tell you, Elizabeth, China today is like the America of the past. It is inexpensive. The quality of stuff is very good. It is extremely safe. And I enjoy when I go driving around in China. Of course, I can't drive myself, but when I go driving around in China, I sometimes forget that I'm not driving in the US because the infrastructure is great, actually without potholes. So I hardly ever see a pothole in China.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe it's better than here right now.
It is, actually, it is. And I tell you, even in very isolated places, you have really well-lit tunnels. I almost never see a pothole. Of course, people don't drive as well as they do in the US, but then in San Francisco, people don't necessarily drive too well either. So the driving is improving in this country, but the thing is that there are a lot of good things about China, and everything is cheap. It's just extremely cheap. I pay probably, I would say, 1/4 of what I would pay in San Francisco.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So it's interesting because, you know, we talk about cycles, right? So I think Ray Dalio did a phenomenal job with the cyclical nature of empires. And so we talk about that the United States is unfortunately at the decline, right? We're in the decline phase. We're in the very last stage of the empire cycle, whereas China is on the rise. China, like you just compared China where it is right now to the United States when it was on the rise, when it was in that place. And it begs an interesting question for the United States, because when the British Empire fell, we looked at, you know, a large portion of the globe being part of the British Empire. And we joke that most countries' independence is from Great Britain, right? Most countries' independence days are from British rule. So the United States at the end of this cycle has a couple of choices, right? Does it just completely fail and lose all of its control is probably a good word, but influence, whatever word you'd like to use? Does the United States lose all of that? Or what does the United States do as it's in that decline and as it's watching China truly rise in that way? 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, China was absolutely not where it is right now. It's grown enormously, and good for China, because it raised an enormous amount of people out of poverty, horrible poverty. So what options do the US and China kind of have? So first of all, what option does the United States have on the decline of an empire to either make it softer, or what is the possibility for it moving forward? And then US-China relations, because it's starting to do a teeter-totter thing, what is a possible future for US-China relations that you see maybe coming?
So, Elizabeth, I think there are two sides of that story. One is that Americans as people are among the most generous and open-minded people on the planet. So if Americans were given the right information about China, they would very likely embrace China. I talk with my friends, and most of my friends roll their eyes when I tell them about how good China can be. Now, Elizabeth, maybe later tonight or tomorrow, I might get into trouble with the Chinese government, and then I might change my perception about China.
Sure.
But as it stands today, I have a very positive opinion about the country and the society. And when I tell my friends about China, they either roll their eyes or they say that, hey, I got followed by the police in China, or I might get arrested. This is what my friends tell me, and that's completely erroneous. Chinese government, and I understand it's not a democratic country. It is still a developing country, but it is not a paranoid country. I never faced paranoia from the Chinese government people the way I felt, let's say, when I traveled in Myanmar or Belarus or Russia.
Sure.
That's not the paranoia you face in China. I think Western people through Western media should be given a more balanced opinion on China.
Certainly. Yeah.
Okay, and I tell you, I'm a libertarian, and most libertarians would normally say that, hey, I would rather have sacrifice economic growth, but not sacrifice liberty. But Elizabeth, as a woman, I tell you, you would feel far more free in China today than you would in any Western country, because it is safe and increasingly safe. Sometimes when I'm traveling in China, I think I'm in Singapore. It's so safe, so organized. People, I was talking with a Chinese girl one day, and I said, what kind of sexual harassment do you face in China? And her response was, why would anyone harass me?
Oh, wow.
Okay. So of course, that was probably, she lived a sheltered life and she probably didn't really venture out too much. But I tell you, it is increasingly safe. And I think Americans should get a better understanding of China. The problem starts when politicians get involved and demagoguery gets involved. And then they want votes and they want the power. But what I like about Trump is that Trump wants to reduce America's presence as the world's policeman. And that is the right thing to do. That will balance the power with China, because then the interaction will be more trade related. And there is a lot of symbiosis between China and the US than people think there is, because as someone said, America, Western countries and America is great for 0 to 1, which is philosophy, ideas, science, basic, very fundamental things. But when it comes to creating technology, building on those things, East Asians are much better. They copy your product, they copy your ideas, and then they make much better products out of those things. And I completely agree with that. I think China is doing, there's a very good symbiosis between the two societies, rather than a fight between the two countries on average person to average person basis. And also, to finish this off, an average Chinese love America. He copies America. He wants to look American.
Yeah. So I went to China. I actually did corporate visits across China and South Korea because I thought I would be an expat. Like I thought that's what my career held, but it was about a decade ago. So I have not been to China recently. So this is of course my experience from a decade ago, which I'm sure has very much changed. And I was met with people wanted to touch my hair, and people were very interested and very kind to me when I was in China, for sure. But I do agree that there does need to be a very much more balanced conversation about China, and Trump has not been as intense on China as he has been in the past. I don't know whether that's going to change or not, but I don't like having anyone as a scapegoat, because my observation is that the United States has used China as a scapegoat. So, hey, everything is so bad here in the United States because China took your jobs. Well, that's not the truth. The truth is that US corporate interests found that it was cheaper, so they sent the jobs to China. That was not China did not go get that. So I think that there is a very unhealthy view, not only of China, but everywhere else in the world, because the United States is kind of isolated in the way that it is. It's not really, we have Mexico and we have Canada. on the very far ends, but the majority of the United States and the majority of the people who live in it are kind of isolated in their own way. So the majority of Americans don't actually know much about what's going on in the rest of the world by media and proximity. So I very, very much agree with that. But what do you think the United States can now do? Because I see the same thing as you in terms of Trump not wanting to be the police for the world anymore. I think that's very healthy. I think that's the right direction. But what do you see is the future of the United States?
Well, you're talking about the relationship between China and the US, or just the future of the US?
Just the future of the US, and then the future of China and the US.
Well, this is my, I think the US continues to be the best country on the planet. It's a wonderful place with wonderful people, but degradation of the US is baked in the cake, and it is baked in the cake because close to 45% or 50% of American population is of people who are from the third world. Now, the third world countries are third world countries not because of their tyrants, etc., etc. They are third world countries because of the people they have. So those people carry the third world with them. When they come to the US, they participate in converting the US into a third world country. Now, those could be from sub-Saharan Africa, those could be from El Salvador, those could be from anywhere in the world, but they bring in the third world ways of lifestyle to the US, and they vote in ways which makes American politics more and more third world-like. Trump is just a fabulous change from that continual degradation, because he is doing things that America should have been doing and America should continue to do. Unfortunately, Elizabeth, Trump is in power only for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
And even then, elections are coming in November, and then there will be elections next year. And he will start facing pressures from the Republican Party because, again, the voters are demographic shift means that more and more voters of third world people kind are going to continue to influence American politics. So in conclusion, I love America. I think it's the best country on the planet, but the higher order factors are working against America. Trump will slow down degradation of the US, but degradation will pick up pace once he's gone, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have very strong fears about that for the United States, but you're absolutely right. I mean, there's obviously I'm the product of immigration here. David's obviously the product of immigration here. But my mother is Polish and my father is American. So I feel like I have a beautiful best of both worlds. But there are, of course, brilliant people who are coming here, studying at university and really contributing to society. But I think the problem that people have with immigration isn't that, right? It's not the very smart people who are coming from Asia to the United States to learn and help the country grow. It is the people who are unfortunately coming with nothing or less than nothing, and the United States has had to support them.
Well, I can agree with you, but I also think that bringing in the smartest people of the third world is not a good thing, because you deplete leadership from the third world societies by doing that.
Yeah.
And as a result, those countries start falling apart, and the poor people and less intelligent people start coming in as well. So you are better off acting the way East Asian countries do, which is to just have a moratorium on immigration, complete moratorium on immigration, even of intelligent people. Now, again, Elizabeth, I'm a product of immigration as well. But I came to North America not to help North America. I came here for myself because I was living in a shithole and I wanted to get out of it. So I would still say stop all immigration, but I would still come because I sought what was in my best interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense.
That
This
makes
is nothing.
sense.
If you can move up the ladder in life, then what's the point? So that's a good. That I agree with you, Giant.
Well, and
That's the point
honestly,
of it.
I have a lot of friends from India. One of my bridesmaids at my wedding is Indian, and she was like, "I'm not going back."
Well,
I
India
was
got
like, "Okay,
yeah, India has more
I
problems.
get you."
I mean, I look at it just, and you and I, Giant, we talked about this before. Just the example of India in BRICS. You know,
Mhm.
I'm one of those that I say India should not even be in BRICS to begin with.
It's
No.
an interesting choice
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
look at it also with these tariffs. I didn't even know till
Mhm.
Trump brought it up that India had much higher tariffs on American
Yeah,
products.
absolutely.
So wait a minute, India putting that much tariffs on American products?
Mhm.
That just didn't make sense to me. So yeah, it's one of those that I believe they shouldn't be in breaks. They're just
Yeah.
straightforward. There is no ifs and buts, but that's how I see it. What do you think, Giant? Should India?
I completely agree with you. A dead fish destroys the whole pond.
Yeah,
Yeah.
India is a country that has really no values. There's no public policy. Everything is driven by expediency, and the situation is getting worse with time. If you go back to the Nehru's era or the earlier governments, there were more attachment to the rule of law and fairness. Those things are getting depleted very rapidly in that country. There are, the government today is demagoguery government, and they have really no connection with the concept of the rule of law and fairness. And they have no values. So they will lean towards China when the time is there to lean towards China, and they will lean towards the West when there's time to lean towards the West. But at the end of the day, you can't trust India as a partner in anything. And that's why, quite rightly, India is not a part of Security Council. It is not a part of G7. It's not a part of, really, Quad is an impotent organization under with Indian influence. Quad was supposed to be a security arrangement between the Western countries and India. Instead, it just became a bureaucratic organization, nothing else. And similarly, China, any influence of India in BRICS will be the same as that of a dead fish in a pond. It will destroy the whole thing. And I think India will be an impotent participant anyway, because it has no values. The moment Trump said that you cannot give up on US dollar, Prime Minister Modi and India's foreign minister just accepted right away that they would continue to use the US dollar. They would not use BRICS currency. They have no spine. They give in very quickly.
Yeah, I do believe that, Giant. I followed that particular decision very closely. And I remember I did a video on that one saying that is now India doing the US bidding? And that is the reason why they maintain, the US wants them to stay, in addition to being pulled into a Quad. All this have the sole purpose of ensuring that India will do the bidding for the US. That was just my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's how I see it.
And India removed tariffs on American products the moment Trump asked it to. I would have been, if I really believed in those tariffs, I would have done what Europe and Canada is doing, which is to fight back. India has no fighting power. It is just a spineless country which gave in a microsecond after Trump said India was charging too high a tariff on American products.
Well, unfortunately, India doesn't have infrastructure. India has a large population, but they're a relatively small economy, I believe, for the population that it has. And instead of, unfortunately, I mean, I've also been to India. I went to a very, very close friend's wedding in India for a few weeks, and I traveled around, and it was an interesting experience. It was definitely certainly positive, and there were certain negative aspects of it as well. But India has an enormous amount of potential that I feel like it just isn't tapping into. So if you're looking at,
like what, for India?
Well, so India has a large population.
Yeah, but the population sometimes can become the problem in itself.
Sure,
when you have a population that is,
agree.
The population in itself that is not even disciplined to begin with.
Sure. But
I mean,
what,
you heard. Pardon me if
no,
I.
no, I agree.
Yeah, pardon
I
me if
agree.
I interrupt here, because I still remember the case of that Swedish girl that's in India.
Oh,
So where is
absolutely,
the population?
absolutely.
You know, it's
No,
kind of
that's not what I mean. What I mean is India has a large population that it could do something with should it choose, right?
Yeah.
Should India have chosen to do something with the population that it has not chosen to, clearly. But if it chose to, so one of the big issues globally right now is we're seeing a decline in population across all of the West. The only reason that we have a stable population or an increasing population is because of immigration. So we have a declining population everywhere in the world. China has a massively declining population also because of the one child, and which I don't know what they were thinking at the time. I don't know what that was for them back then. But they have a decreasing population as well. So you're seeing, and across Asia, we also have several countries that are decreasing population. So one of the only, so Africa has an increasing population. And so it's very interesting watching manufacturing and watching especially mining, because it has a bunch of rare earth minerals going to Africa, right? And so I think India, should it choose to, and of course you are the expert on this, not me, should it have chosen to in the past, it could have elevated its population like China did, but it didn't choose that.
No, that's not how to put it, Elizabeth. India has no potential. India has the same potential as lead has to be converted into gold. Lead and gold weigh approximately the same, but you will literally put trillions of dollars into converting a microgram of lead into gold by playing around with its atoms and the ingredients of the atom. So India has no potential. You really have to walk the street outside the key centers of the country to understand that Indians are unskilled. They have no ambition, and they don't have a set of values which make East Asia and Western countries successful. There's no concept of virtues and concepts like honor and integrity and honesty. If I enter into a contract with an Indian company, I absolutely guarantee you that in case the contract ends up becoming favorable towards me, the Indian company will dishonor the contract. And bringing in those virtues and 10 commandments into your society is a process of several millennia, not a matter of several centuries or generations. It's a process of several millennia, and India simply does not have the virtues that give a spine to the civilization, something that Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and West Europeans took millennia to develop. And they independently maybe developed those values, but those values took a very long time, and India is showing no sign of ever developing those virtues. As I speak, India is getting worse by the day. So instead of improving, it is getting worse. So no, there's no potential, and I absolutely guarantee you, Elizabeth, if we talk 2 years from now or 5 years from now, I will still be saying the same thing. In fact, with more assertiveness, because India will be that much worse, and it will be going much worse than I thought it would be going. So that's how bad the situation of that country is.
Well, it's the truth, because I tell you that I have nothing against India. I know I get comments sometimes, negative about India. It's the truth. And there are some Indian citizens that last time I was with the Jayant on the other channel, one of them sent in a comment, and he said, what Jayant said is true. I live in India, and I see what he's saying. So back to my point, but back in the 90s, I used to hear about how India's gonna be at the top of the world, thinking that, and I've been reading articles from the mainstream West that is advocating that narrative that India said, well, come on, the reality suggests otherwise. So, and my question to you, Jayant, is, could it also, this has to do with India not being able to free itself of the colonialism mindset?
Oh, that's interesting.
No, the colonial mindset was a positive mindset. I'm a product of, I'm a child of Macaulay. I'm a child of the British Empire. I am the child who was marinated in Western culture in a Catholic school. So whatever goodness that you see in India is what I called a Christianized Brahmanism. Um, because
Interesting.
that country by itself has no set of values. It has nothing that it really believes in except money and sex. So the humanitarian civilizational values came to India from European countries. So I prefer to have that westernized mindset rather than the local mindset. And Elizabeth, I might even say that, yes, I completely agree with you that India is one of the poorest countries on the planet. And in fact, if Africa were a country, I think Africa would be a richer country than India is. So India is a really a cesspool, which somehow, because of how the media has presented India, does not look like it. Because there are some of the best Indians have decided to move to the US because India is just such a dysfunctional place that no one with half a brain would want to live in India. The best of Indians have moved to the US, which might give you a feeling that India might not be that bad, but India is on average worse than Africa is, and probably worse than sub-Saharan Africa as well. But I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but that's how bad it is. Look at you were mentioning mining. People prefer to do mining in Congo, in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, which is insanity. I mean, it's not like those places are stable.
But no one wants to do mining in India. Have you ever heard of? I mean, I have worked for American and Canadian companies wanting to invest in India, and we always hit a roadblock and we give up. That's how bad that country is.
Yeah, my so like I said, one of my best friends is Indian, and she refuses to go back. I mean, she married an American man, and so she's here permanently, but she said she refused to go back. It was, and I don't blame her. I mean, the small pieces of India that I saw, like I said, there were some extraordinary temples that I visited. There's some beautiful places, but I mean, they wouldn't. The family, they had me with a driver and a security person. Like I was not allowed to go anywhere by myself out of safety.
Yeah, and that is why you saw nothing of India. Right. You see something of India only if you walk the street by yourself, and preferably 10 kilometers away from the center of the city. That's when you start really understanding the city. I should respond to your earlier question about what is holding back India. Elizabeth, if you talk with an average Indian, he has no passion, he has no vision for his life. He just wants to have money to live a hedonistic lifestyle. So unfortunately, he is not driven by any values, and he has no vision for himself. In fact, if you want to get married in India, it is not unlikely, and more likely than not, you will be asked a question, how much bribes you collect. So they have no values which tell them that, hey, collection of bribe is not the right thing to live a life. But all they care about is money. So an average Indian, or I would say 99.99% Indians are only interested in money and sex. And they have no other civilizational interest. They have no interest in the society. And in fact, what I've seen, Elizabeth, in China, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in East Europe, is that when people become richer, they want to contribute to making their society better.
Yeah.
That's the exact opposite is the case in India. The richer they become, the more antisocial they become, because they derive sadistic pleasure from keeping poor people poor and wretched. So, and that is again a factor which keeps telling me that the future of India is far worse than I think it would be.
Wow, that's a reality.
That's awful. Well, so should India leave BRICS?
What
do you think? Should India leave BRICS?
No, because
out.
They should kick India out, but India will never leave BRICS because it works in favor of the demagogues of India to claim that it is a part of an important organization like G20 or Quad or BRICS. And Indians, while they might be pooping in the open, would then feel very proud that India has moon mission and India is a part of BRICS and etc. etc. So this is all demagoguery, and Indians are very prone to falling for delusions. They make up all the fancy stories while they have nothing. They have no running water, they have no running electricity, they have no toilets, and then they want to feel proud about being in these useless organizations or useful organizations which they make useless because they have no value structure. But for the benefit of China, I congratulate them that there's a long mountain range dividing India from China, because that stops the inflow of immigrants into China, which could happen at one point of time, despite the fact that China does not let any immigrants come in, refugees come in.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take that China has. I mean, it's not just China, other Asian countries have it too. I mean, try and immigrate to Japan. It's ridiculous. It doesn't work, right? They're not interested in immigration. And here in the Western world, though, there is an enormous push for accepting immigration. And so that's a very interesting mindset difference.
Because Elizabeth, I think, again, I go back to what I said earlier. Europeans and Americans and Canadians are very generous-minded people. They are very open-hearted people. And they are extremely kind, compassionate, and tolerant. And they project their personalities on outsiders who don't believe in the same values. The other people are tribal, and Western people are too open-minded for their own good. And unfortunately, I think because of the history of Europeans, because they intermingled, they brought in too many outsiders in the past. They had no other alternative but to continue doing that, whereas East Asians did not do that. Japan, Korea, China are almost 99 to 99.8% made up of local people. A lot of workers in Japan are Chinese. The illegal workers are Chinese. So even when Japan bring in outsiders on temporary basis, they bring in people who are more compatible with them culturally than people who are totally incompatible. So if a sub-Saharan African or an Indian wants to immigrate to China, forget it. It's not going to happen.
That's very, very interesting. And I think you're right. I think it's a fundamental mindset difference. And I do think in the Western world, unfortunately, there isn't much education as to what the rest of the world is like. And what the values that the rest of the world holds are. And I do think that that's a fault of the American school system, at the very least, if not American media.
Well, Elizabeth, the thing with kind-hearted good people is that they have an handicap understanding low-quality people. So extremely intelligent people fail to understand what stupidity is, and good people fail to understand what evil is. So that is certainly a part of it. But I agree with you that political correctness has been a hindrance for Western people to understand the world. When I was in the UK 30 years back doing my post-graduation, people understood the nature of the third world much better. But I think over the last 3 to 5 decades, political correctness has erased that wisdom from the psyche of the Western world. And now it has become extremely risky, Elizabeth. So if you really want to talk about all your experiences of traveling in India, you will worry about getting cancelled in the West today. So political correctness has played a big part in destroying that wisdom.
If you notice, I didn't share a lot of my experience, and that's why is
despite the fact that you had a chauffeur and a security with you.
Yeah, that is absolutely, that's despite it. I was in a part of India that was not tourist based, so there were I was the one in this large town, so it was a very interesting experience for me. But I was safe and protected, and the family was fantastic, and everyone around the family was fantastic. But the rest of my experience was was very interesting, including my flight into into the city that I went into from New Delhi was very, very interesting. I'd never been on a plane that was in that state before. So yes, I agree.
Well, I mean, if I might just expand on that, Indian stewardesses will never clean the plane because it is below their dignity to keep anything clean, which means that the domestic flights in India the toilets are always dirty. They don't have paper in them. They don't have soap or running water in them. And no flight staff will look after that. In fact, even the international flights that are owned by Indian companies will have dirty toilets because Indians consider it below their dignity to clean toilets. And in fact, when I write anything about India or I say anything about India, Indians will comment that, Jayant, you are a toilet cleaner in San Francisco, as if there's something to be looked down upon if you're a toilet cleaner.
Absolutely.
So that's the way Indians think, unfortunately. So that's if I might have elaborated your experience, but that's one of it.
Sure. Yes, that's certainly part of it.
I have one last question for me. Do you have a question?
No,
for
go
Jayant?
ahead. I know we're keeping. I don't
Yeah,
want to
'cause
keep
we
you
don't want to keep
much
Jayant
over your
forever,
time. I know
so,
it's first thing in the morning for you.
Yeah. So I have one last question here, Jayant. You are an investor, and the way I'm looking at this, even from a geopolitical aspect, but there is an economic aspect to it. Given the rare earth elements now that we know that China controls a large percentage of that. But there's also an interest coordination that's going on between some ASEAN countries, and I'm going to refer only to 3 here. That as a geopolitical analyst, what I see over the horizon is that the United States is trying to create a wedge between China and those 3 countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. Why those 2 countries, Indonesia and Malaysia, are of interest to China is because of the rare earth elements and so forth. Will I be wrong in my assessments?
Well, firstly, Malaysia and Singapore and Indonesia will follow China irrespective of what happens. Okay. And Singapore, I lived in Singapore for a couple of years last decade. I keep going to Singapore. I absolutely love that country because it's the best run country on the planet. Singaporean politicians, if you listen to some of the Singaporean politicians, they are some of the best educated politicians in the world. My view is that a person like Lee Kuan Yew should have been the Secretary General of United Nations. He would have sorted out so many international problems. Singapore is a very rational country. It refuses to either completely side with China or completely side with the US. It chooses the rational path, which is good for itself and which is fair and rational and moral. So Singapore is not going to become a participant in politics between China and the US. And I think the same will be likely the case with Indonesia and Malaysia, because they benefit from China more than they benefit from the US. Both of them are big suppliers of natural resources, and China is the consumer of those, particularly coal and nickel. So those countries, I don't think, want to move away from China. But also, Malaysian and Indonesian economy is doing better to the extent that there's a Chinese participation in those countries. So I doubt if a wedge is possible to be created between China and Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore.
Wow, very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And one thing about natural resources, I don't know how it will all play out. Commodities are commodities because they find their way around the world. So if China does not put restrictions on exports to the US, those commodities, rare earth metals, will find their way through other countries. As you can see, oil price went up when Russia-Ukraine war started, but then oil started flowing to Europe through different channels. and copper started getting melted in India and being recirculated in the world as Indian copper rather than as Russian or Russian copper. So commodities have a habit of finding their way around, and I think Russia's tariffs on American agricultural products is not going to work either, because those commodities will find their way to China without the tariff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's so funny. It's like, okay, well, it's not coming from Russia. Well, it's coming from Russia through somewhere else. And I mean, business is clever like that. I'm not the biggest fan of big business overall, but big business is clever that way. They'll find a way around it.
Well, very, very interesting. Guys, as we always say, when we have Jayant Bhandari here, you're going to hear the truth as it is. So, and it's something also for you to really, really be informed regarding a host of issues that we address with Jayant here. So I'll give you the last word, Jayant, some words of wisdom for our community.
Well, thanks for having me, David. And if you want me to promote one thing I do, which is that I run a philosophy seminar in Vancouver. The next one is on the 23rd of August. And the link of registration for that seminar is on my website, jayantbhandari.com.
Yeah.
And
I do have the links, which,
okay,
by the way,
guys, great. Guys, it'll be in the description.
We put the link. I put them already in the description. There's the links to Jayant Bhandari's, all his links regarding social media, and including the center he just mentioned there. So, well, we can't thank you enough, Jayant, for really carving out time for us here to share your knowledge with us, with our community, and we look forward to having you again on this channel here.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Elizabeth.